Welcome to the Project Management Prepcast, the direct route to PMP exam success. Here's your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner.
Welcome back. This is part 2 of our lesson on the Plan Risk Responses process. I'm your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner. So in part 1, we looked at the overview, the inputs, and we saw the first of our 4 tools and techniques, the strategies for negative risks or threats. And now in part 2 here, we are going to be moving on with the other 3 tools and techniques, the strategies for positive risks or opportunities, contingent response strategies, and also expert judgment. And then we move on to the outputs. We'll do the review, sample exam questions, and a tip at the end as well. So we're moving on to our second tool and technique, the strategies for positive risks or opportunities. Let's take a high-level view here and see the differences between what you want to do with a threat versus an opportunity here. So if you have a threat, you may want to avoid that threat. That might be the choice that you take. But in regards to an opportunity, you definitely don't want to avoid an opportunity. You want to exploit your opportunity. If you have a threat, you may want to transfer that threat to somebody else. Again, not so with an opportunity. You don't want to transfer the opportunity to somebody else, but you want to share it. You may want to share it with somebody else. And lastly, if you have a threat, you may wish to mitigate the negative impact. Again, not so with an opportunity. With an opportunity, you may want to enhance the opportunity. You may want to make it even more opportune for your project. And so now you see why there are strategies both for negative risks and positive risks, because we want to handle them differently when it is a risk versus an opportunity. Where positive risks are concerned, the project manager wants to take steps to make them more likely to occur. These strategies are exploit, enhance, share, and accept. Acceptance is also a strategy that we use for negative risks or threats, as you may remember from part 1. So let's go through these strategies again individually. First, we have exploit. Why may we want to do that? Well, in the definition of risk, you will find the word uncertainty. And where the strategy of exploitation is concerned, you are trying to remove the uncertainty and instead make sure that the opportunity is realized. For instance, if you want to be the first one to market with a particular product, your strategy may be to add more resources to the project and add more features so that you can deliver the product early and attract more attention. Second, we have enhance. The enhance strategy first requires that you understand the underlying causes of your risk, of your opportunity, so that you can increase the probability or the positive impact of this opportunity occurring. By working to influence and maximize the key drivers, you can increase the likelihood of this risk, of this opportunity occurring. Our third strategy for positive risks is to share. Sharing a positive risk involves working with another party, a third party, so that the benefits of the opportunity can be shared between you both, and both parties gain from their actions. Some examples of sharing include forming risk-sharing partnerships or joint ventures. And then the fourth strategy, accept. Accepting an opportunity is your willingness to take advantage of the opportunity if the opportunity presents itself. You don't, however, actively pursue it, but if it occurs, you welcome it. So now we know that there are 4 strategies that you can employ in response to an opportunity. And just as we saw with our risk responses in regards to threats, there is an inherent order in which you may apply them here to your project opportunities. So If you are faced with a good opportunity, the first question to ask yourself is, can we accept this opportunity as it stands, or does it call for action? If you say, well, we accept it as it stands, you simply accept it and you do nothing about it. However, if you say, no, this is a good opportunity, it calls for action, you are then going to ask yourself, is there a way to exploit this? The idea being that if you simply accept an opportunity and you just say, yeah, well, wait until it happens, then you do nothing to make it come true. But if you select to exploit it, you will take appropriate action to make sure that it happens. So you begin exploiting it. But you also ask yourself, do we not only want to exploit it, do we want to actively enhance it, maybe, to get the most out of its positive effect? And if the answer here is also yes, you then devise an appropriate strategy, not only to exploit it, but maybe also even to enhance the possibility of it occurring. However, if your answer is no, you may find that you cannot exploit or enhance it yourself because you lack the resources or the experience. Now it is time to share this with someone else. Let someone else take the responsibility for reaping all the benefits that come from this opportunity, and then you and that someone else can share the positive fallout. There are some risk response strategies that are based on the occurrence of certain events. For some risks, the project team may make a decision related to the risk, but that decision is contingent upon certain predefined conditions or triggers. And this is how it goes. You can describe the future event today. You can define an appropriate mitigation strategy today. However, this strategy is only implemented when the event actually presents itself in the future. So there is actually nothing you can do about it today except describe it, prepare for it, and document it. One important aspect for these strategies to work is to define the triggers or predefined conditions that you should be aware of to make sure that when the situation occurs, you are able to recognize it and apply your contingent response strategy. How unfortunate it would be if you had done all the planning for this future event, yet when the risk started to show itself as an issue, you didn't even realize it. So be sure to define now what trigger it is that will alert you when a risk is about to occur, so that you know when you will need to employ your contingent response strategy. Proper risk response strategies often require input from knowledgeable sources regarding the actions that need to be taken on specific risks. This is where expert judgment, of course, comes into play. Expert judgment may be provided by an individual or a group who has specialized education, skill, experience, or training in creating risk responses. We are moving on to the two outputs of the plan risk responses process. We have the updates to the project management plan and the updates to the project documents. Plan risk responses is all about our responses to risks. Consequently, the updates that we have as an output in this process are obviously about our responses. A consequence of implementing all the strategies that we learned about in the tools and techniques is that it normally yields a great deal of information that has to be updated in our project management plan. And some of the elements of the project management plan that may have to be updated are the schedule management plan. It may now include changes in tolerance to resource loading and resource leveling, and updates to the schedule strategy. The cost management plan updates. These may include changes related to cost accounting, tracking and reports. Updates to the quality management plan may include changes related to requirements, quality assurance, and quality control. And there could also be updates to the procurement management plan, which may include changes in strategy, such as alterations as to the make or buy decisions or contract types driven by your risk response. Well, think about it. If you want to share an opportunity with somebody, you're probably going to want to have a contract with them, so you may need to update the procurement management plan. There are 4 more areas of the project management plan that may need to be updated. The human resource management plan is such an area. More specifically, the staffing management plan may need to include changes in the organizational structure, or new resources need to be applied, driven by risk responses. The scope baseline may need to be changed because of new, modified, or omitted work as a result of our risk responses. The schedule baseline, again, because of new or omitted work. And lastly, the cost baseline, again, because of new or omitted work that comes because of certain risk response strategies that we are applying on our project. And of course, as a result of the plan risk responses process, there are several project documents that are updated as needed. One of the main documents that we update is, of course, you guessed it, the risk register. When the applicable risk responses are selected and agreed upon, the risk register is updated to reflect this. We need to document our response somewhere. The risk register should indicate risks that correspond to the priority ranking and planned responses. You have the high and moderate level risks that are addressed in detail, and those risks that are deemed to be of low priority are included but are on a watch list to be monitored periodically. Here are a few ideas of what you may also need to be updating in your risk register. Risk owners may change and their assigned responsibility. Of course, the response strategies that have been agreed upon, they need to go into your risk register. We need to talk about budget and schedule activities that are necessary to implement the selected responses. You can't just have a response without giving time or money to the resource to perform their activities. There may be trigger conditions, their symptoms, and the warning signs of a risk occurrence. There could be residual risks that remain after the planned risk response has been implemented. And of course, whenever you implement a risk response, there could be a secondary risk that result as a consequence of your implemented risk response. Again, this is not a comprehensive list. There is more that could be updated in the risk register, but these are the most likely updates to the risk register. So let's take a brief moment and talk about the 2 terms of residual risk and secondary risk that I just mentioned. A residual risk is a risk that remains after a risk response has been implemented. For instance, we may have found that we have a 30% risk that our subcontractor may produce sub-quality deliverables. Our response is to find another subcontractor. The residual risk is that our expected insufficient quality has decreased to only 10% now. We did not completely remove the risk, but we mitigated it, since there is still a 10% remaining risk probability. That is what we call a residual risk, and we accept it. Then a secondary risk. This is a risk that arises as a direct result of implementing our risk response. As we continue with our previous example with the subcontractor, we have now created a secondary risk by going forward with a different subcontractor. This secondary risk may be that their production site is not in the same town as our original subcontractors was. This one is over 1,800 miles away. We now have created a new risk, and that is a 25% probability of a communications error. We avoided the first risk, but we have subsequently created a new risk. That is what is known as a secondary risk. There are other project documents in addition to the risk register that are updated as a result of our process here. And 3 of these include the assumptions log. This could be revisited to include new information on changed assumptions as a result of the implemented risk responses and the resulting new information. Based on the risk strategy implemented, technical approaches and physical deliverables could change. Therefore, any supporting technical documentation will need to accommodate this new information. And the possibility of risks requires planning, and planning for those risks often leads to recommended changes in resources, activities, cost estimates, and other items. The identified recommendations must be handled via change requests and processed through the Perform Integrated Change Control process. Let's review. The Plan Risk Responses process is a process of creating viable options to enhance opportunities and reduce threats. This is the process where you plan what you will do with your risk. It is not where you actually do anything about your risks. Risk responses should be appropriate and reflect the importance of the risk. And finally, the risk register contains your list of identified risks and all the associated information about those risks. That's why it's the primary document that we will update with our risk responses. And when it comes to developing risk responses, we have strategies for positive risks and strategies for negative risks. We have 4 strategies for addressing negative risks or threats, and these are avoid, transfer, mitigate, and accept. And the 4 strategies for dealing with positive risks or opportunities are exploit, enhance, share, and again, accept. For certain risks, it is necessary to implement a contingent response strategy that will only be executed provided certain predefined conditions occur. And finally, risk enhancement is very similar to risk exploitation, but you want to also ensure that the positive impact of this opportunity is much bigger than what you can expect now. You will put actions in place that hopefully increase the chance that the opportunity actually happens, and if it does, that its results will even be bigger. And here is a PMP exam sample question that you might find in an online simulator or a book. It reads as follows. You are managing a software project that includes using a particular piece of cutting-edge technology. However, due to the risks involved, you choose a more reliable yet slower technology. Which risk strategy are you employing? Are you employing A, risk transference, B, risk acceptance, C, risk avoidance, or is this D, risk exploitation? I'll give you a few seconds again here. The correct answer is, of course, that this is risk avoidance. You're choosing to avoid the risk that is associated with using the cutting-edge technology for a more reliable technology. Risk transference would be if you shifted the risk impact to a third party. That does not apply here. Risk acceptance is simply acknowledging the risk and taking no action, and you are taking action here, so that doesn't apply. And finally, risk exploitation, the answer D. This is only for opportunities, and this scenario is obviously not an opportunity. This is a threat. Our second exam sample question is all about understanding when risk responses are supposed to occur for a contingent response strategy. The question reads as follows. When implementing your contingent response strategy, the response is designed to occur in one of the following 4 answers here. Is it A, it's supposed to occur when the future event is described and documented? Is it supposed to occur when you decide the event should be avoided? Or when you assume the risk is about to occur? Or is it D, once the predefined condition triggers the event? which one of these four is correct? The answer is, of course, that a risk response from a contingent response strategy is designed to occur once the predefined condition triggers the event. Remember, a contingent response strategy is contingent upon certain conditions that are occurring that will trigger the event. Describing and documenting the future event, A&P, they're just steps in the process of producing a contingent response strategy. Option B and C are not really real options here, and they don't apply at all. Before we go, here are some tips in regards to our inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs to help you prepare for your PMP exam. Inputs and outputs are always tangible items. By this I mean that they are objects that you can touch. Inputs are assets, documents, plans, registers, change requests, or documented constraints and assumptions. And outputs are either plans or updates to that plan, agreements, reports, or documented changes, or completed deliverables. Tools, on the other hand, often have a quality of action within them. Look for words like gathering, compiling, meeting, interviews, skills, methods, time or cost reporting systems, issue logs, analysis. This is an important fact to remember, because I find that quite often when you come to sample questions like which of the following is not an input to plan risk responses, and you know how much I like those type of questions, they will give you 3 actual inputs, so things you can touch, tangible items, and then the 4th one, the one that you are supposed to be identifying, is a tool and technique, so it has an action associated with it. And if you combine your understanding of this distinction between inputs, outputs, and tools and techniques, and you combine that with your understanding of why we have certain inputs in one process but not in the other, then you should have no problem picking the right one in a sample question like this. And this concludes our look at the plan risk responses process. So it's time for Justine to say,
I'll catch you around.
and I say, until next time.